women in their post-reproductive years are so beneficial to their human groups, like their family groups. Human lifespan evolved because of menopause. And that's for both sexes. So men get to live longer too because those long-lived genes were so beneficial in women.
Yeah, I remember doing some digging somewhere, and I was absolutely able to confirm that if you made it to the age of 30 or 35, you would go through menopause. Basically, if you survive that long, then you were going to keep living, basically.
Yeah, so we know this from modern day forager people. I mean, not to get too far into the weeds on this, but there are some people still in the world who are living a very traditional lifestyle. They know about menopause, they're happy about it, they do not experience symptoms with it. That's pretty clear in the scientific literature and observations from those modern day forager people. So there's nothing about perimenopause, the transition, that should be inherently symptomatic. It can be very symptomatic because of what's called evolutionary mismatch, or a mismatch with our modern world. And there are several factors that do contribute to symptoms in the modern world.
So if we looked at our, say, grandmothers or even their mothers, the chances of them having symptoms in perimenopause were low?
Yeah, I think it was lower. Actually, if you want to know, perimenopause, those years leading up to the final period, is actually a time of kind of higher than normal estrogen. And then, of course, menopause or postmenopause are the 3 or 4 decades, if we're lucky, of our life that is in a lower estrogen state, not a zero estrogen state. A colleague of mine, a professor of endocrinology, she frames it as, I really love this, she frames it as those post-reproductive lower hormone years, during those decades, we're freed from the demands of our reproductive hormones. Mm-hmm. We are, as humans, even unique compared to other mammals, we are adapted to that lower hormone state. Our body can recalibrate to that, which is not to say that nobody should take estrogen. It's not like that at all, actually. One of the reasons in our modern world that the perimenopause transition is so difficult is that we, on average, go through our reproductive years with a much higher level of estrogen. We calibrate to that higher estrogen when we're young, and as amazing and beneficial as estrogen is, it's not great to be running hot like that for decades. And in my first book, I talk about estrogen as that super charismatic party friend. Like, you want her to come around once in a while. She's great. But at some point, you really need to push her out the door and have some quiet time. And that's what estrogen's like every menstrual cycle. Actually, you would not want to be running hot at your ovulatory level of estrogen all the time. It's just exhausting. It's quite overstimulating. We don't spend as many years in lactational amenorrhea, which is the period suppressed by breastfeeding. Our ancestors would have spent a big chunk of their life like that. That's a very low estrogen state, actually.
I think what would happen is that they would have more children from a younger age, but over a longer period of time, and potentially not ever experience the transition. They would just stop breastfeeding, and then they would have no more periods.
Very often in that traditional scenario, they would be, having their final baby around 42, breastfeeding for a few years, never getting another period, and then cruising from that breastfeeding state of quite low estrogen, high oxytocin, into just the state of cruisy, into postmenopause, still low estrogen, lower oxytocin. Actually, the scientists are looking into how the role oxytocin might play in not only symptoms of the menopause transition, but also like long-term health risks.
Which might also, completely off topic, but might also explain why women who are in new relationships through perimenopause are actually not experiencing those symptoms because their oxytocin is higher than being in a long-term relationship.
Is that the tip that we're all taking? We all need a new partner.
Well, you know what?
Through menopause.
It's true, and I'll speak to that actually, because there's this sort of narrative that menopause is associated with lower libido. Hormonally speaking, that's actually not true. And it's actually because we start getting more testosterone shining through. So women in their late 40s, 50s can actually have higher libido. And you speak to a woman at that age who's in a new relationship and she's like, low libido? What are you talking about?
In my understanding, what should be happening in those perimenopausal years or the years beforehand, and we probably should also speak to what that is, like you said, but really it should be something like the cycles, they're still considered regular, but they fluctuate. So 28 one, 29 the next, 27 the one after, whereas it used to be like clockwork. It starts to become a little bit more fluctuating.
It shortens. In the earliest phases, actually really classic is the cycle will shorten.
The periods should also become shorter.
Oh, they don't. The bleeds themselves.
But there should be a period in time if you're looking at what's actually happening. I'm not saying that's what we're seeing now, but if you're looking at what should be happening, these are the things that I would say would be normal at this phase in time. We don't see any of this. We see heavier, terrible bleeds. We see night sweats not just before the period. We see them hot flushes. We're not even night sweats, and it's important to distinguish between the two. Like you said, low libido, like all the symptoms that we're seeing that women are talking about shouldn't really be associated with the phase.
Well, it's like I said, there's nothing that should be inherently symptomatic about a transition phase. It's second puberty. The symptoms that young people experience, I would also attribute some of that to the phrase evolutionary mismatch. That's not my phrase, but it just means us, quite ancient beings, creatures, trying to live in the modern world, the nutrient deficiencies, being exposed to the modern food supply, things like that can create symptoms.
Ali, you were very open with your perimenopause and menopause journey. I'd love you to talk about some of the symptoms, but I would also love for you to share which symptom actually surprised you the most.
Gosh, I mean, I was one of those women that went into perimenopause knowing absolutely nothing, like not a single thing. I thought menopause was just something where your period stopped. Maybe I was like that. I was like channeling myself for many years. Yeah, where your period stopped and that was it. Mine was a bit of a perfect storm of things though, where my adrenals were shot. I was under so much stress. I was moving countries and I never expected my mental health to take as big a dive as it did and end up with basically depression. But I think again, it's like there was so many factors that were bleeding into that. The fact I wasn't sleeping, the fact that it was very stressful, the fact I was gaining weight at a huge amount, the fact that I knew nothing of what was happening. So everything just layered on top of that to create like this storm of just so many symptoms and not knowing where to go and what to do. And again, having no resources as well that I knew of at the time.
When I was still seeing patients, if someone came to me and said, all of a sudden, I have a lot of wind, the first thing I'm going to look at is what's happening with their digestion, what's happening with their food, what's happening with stress in their life, because obviously stress can be a huge disruptor to great digestion. And so just because someone is going through their perimenopausal transition, let's say they then come in and say, I'm in perimenopause and I've got all this wind, my brain doesn't go, that's perimenopause. My brain still goes, something happening with the gut. I'm going to find that. So I've always been someone who wants to treat what the person is actually experiencing. I have a phrase I use in my work, the road in is the road out. So I'm not denying for a second that our sex, or they shouldn't even be called sex hormones, but our
ovarian hormones.
Thank you, Lara. That our ovarian, we understand that they play an enormous role, not just with reproduction, but biologically. Progesterone, and Lara speaks to this beautifully, but is a powerful anti-anxiety agent because of the way it binds to GABA receptors, which is one of our chill pills. So I'm not denying for a second that the changes in our sex hormones can have such a big impact on how we feel and function, but it's not where my brain goes first. I will look at gut function. I will look at, it's a time when the thyroid can start to not cooperate. So I'll look if someone's experiencing symptoms of an underactive thyroid, I will do blood tests. I'll look for iron deficiency. So when there's heat, yes, of course, we understand it can be related to changing sex hormones, but I'm going to think of the liver. So because traditional Chinese medicine is not my training, I've read a lot about it and I love it. I was saying to Nat earlier, one day I was just out for a walk and I just had this moment and I wrote a note in my phone. I think a lot of us going through perimenopause would feel so much better if we corrected iron deficiency, if it exists, if we got some acupuncture and stayed off our phones. I think that would help a lot. And that added, yes, we need to sleep properly too. I do worry that some of the symptoms we currently attribute to perimenopause are potentially being caused by other things. And we want to find that out, because if we just focus on the hormones, we can miss iron deficiency and underperforming thyroid, or addressing some of the very basics